In 1965, a man stood in front of cameras and cried. He was announcing that his country had just been thrown out of its own federation. No army, no water, no resources. Most experts gave it 10 years before it collapsed. Today, 60 years later, Singapore has a GDP per capita of $99,000. That makes it richer per person than the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Japan, Australia. On an island the size of a city with no oil, no land, no natural resources of any kind. And this is not luck. This is not oil money like Dubai. This is not inherited wealthy like Switzerland. This is the most deliberate, calculated transformation of a nation in modern history, done by one man with one plan in one lifetime. His name was Lee Kuan Yew. World's leader flew to Singapore just to ask him how he did. Henry Kissinger called him one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century. Deng Xiaoping, who transferred China, sent Chinese officials to Singapore specially to learn from him. But here is what makes this history complicated. Lee Kuan Yew built the richest country in Asia without democracy, as most of the world understands it. No free press, no real political opposition, death penalty for drug trafficking. The same political party in power since 1959, 67 years without losing an election. And yet, Singaporeans constantly rate their government as one of the most trusted in the world. The streets are spotless, the schools are world class, healthcare is excellent, almost nobody wants to leave. So what exactly did Lee Kuan Yew do, and was it worth it? When Lee Kuan Yew became Singapore's first Prime Minister in 1965, the situation was desperate. Britain has announced it was withdrawing its military bases, with employed 20% of Singapore's workforce. Malaysia had threatened to cut off water supplies. Singapore had no currency, no army, and no diplomatic recognition from most of the world. Lee Kuan Yew's first decision was the one that changed everything. He decided Singapore would compete not on resources or size, but on reliability. His logic: if we are more honest, more efficient, more predictable than our neighbors, multinational companies will choose us. We become the trusted hub of Asia. The second decision was English. Lee Kuan Yew made English the official language of business and government. In a country where most people spoke Chinese, Malay, or Tamil, this was controversial. People protested, but it meant every multinational company worldwide could operate in Singapore without a language barrier. The third decision was corruption, or rather the elimination of it. When Lee Kuan Yew came to power, officials took bribes, police took payments. His response: raised civil servants' salaries to match the private sector and destroy anyone who stole anyway. The results started coming within a decade. By the mid-1970s, unemployment was essentially zero. Foreigner investment was flooding in. The port had become one of the busiest in the world, and the government was building at extraordinary scale and speed. The housing program deserves special attention. In 1965, most Singaporeans lived in slums or squatters' settlements. Lee Kuan Yew Housing Development Board built enough public housings to house 80% of Singapore's entire population within 20 years. Clean, modern apartments at price people could afford. No country in history had done this. By 1990, just 25 years after independence, Singapore's GDP per capita had gone from $400 to $11,000, a 27-fold increase. No country in history has grown that fast from that low starting point, and it was only getting started. The education system was rebuilt with one goal: produce the best educated workforce in the world. Singaporean students consistently rank first or second globally in mathematics, science, because Lee Kuan Yew understood one thing: in a country with no natural resources, people are the resources. Changi Airport became the symbol of what Singaporeans had built. Voted the world's best airport for 12 consecutive years. A butterfly garden inside, a rooftop pool, a cinema, a 40 meters indoor waterfall. But the real reason it wins is that it handled 65 million passengers a year with flawless efficiency. Today, Singapore is the world's busiest container port. More cargo passes through Singapore than through New York and Los Angeles combined. 37 million containers a year from a country with nothing to export. But here is what Lee Kuan Yew's success story leaves out. Building this miracle required things that would be unacceptable in most democracies. The press in Singapore does not criticize the government. Journalists who try face defamation, lawsuits that destroy them financially even if they win. Political opposition is not illegal in Singapore, but it might as well be. The PAP has won every election since 1959. In 2020, for the first time, the opposition won 10 seats in parliament. The government called it is a watershed moment. In most democracies, 10 out of 93 seats would be called as catastrophic defeat. The death penalty in Singapore is mandatory for drug trafficking above certain amount. You don't need to be a kingpin. You don't need to be a dealer. Carry more than 15 grams of heroin or 1500 grams of cannabis, you are hanged. No exceptions, no judicial discretion, none. The Internal Security Act allows the government to detain people without trial indefinitely, no charge, no court, no defense. Singapore has used it against political opponents, journalists, and activities. Some held for years without even being told exactly why. This law exists today. It has never been repealed. And yet, 80% of Singaporeans trust their government. In the United States, the figure is 17%. In the UK, 25%. The reason is simple. The government delivers. Every time, the train runs on time, the hospitals work, the schools are excellent, the streets are safe. Lee Kuan Yew's answer to anyone who questions his methods was always the same. Look at the neighbors. Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines all started with more resources than Singapore. All are significantly poorer today. All have more corruption, all have more crime. His argument, my results speak for themselves. Which brings us to the question every leader of a developing nation eventually asks about Singapore. Can we copy it? The answer so far has been not really, because what Singapore had was not just a plan. It was one man trusted completely for 30 years without having to win an election. Lee Kuan Yew died in 2015. Singaporeans lined up for kilometers to pay their respect. The queue stretched for miles. People waited 8 hours to pass his coffin. His son is now Prime Minister. And the question Singapore faces is whether this mission, built by one extraordinary man, can survive without him. Singapore today faces challenges the model was not built to solve. The birth rate is 0.97 children per woman, the lowest in the world. The population is aging. The average STB flat now cost 600 Singapore dollars. Young Singaporeans are asking the same question young people everywhere ask. Can I afford a home? Can I have a family? Is this sustainable? The political model is showing cracks too. The PAP still wins every election, but the margins are shrinking. Young Singaporeans are more likely to questioning authority, demand transparency, challenge the restrictions their parents accepted. The government that built the mission by never losing is now adapting to a generation that wants something different. And yet, by any object measures, Singapore remains one of the greatest stories of human achievements in the modern era. A country that had everything against it built something extraordinary. The question of whether the methods were justified is real and worth debating, but the results are not in question. Here is the question. Singapore forces you to answer. What do you actually want from a government? Freedom, the press, the protest, the vote that matters, or results, clean streets, world-class schools, safe streets, rising income. Most people want both. Singapore proves that getting both at the same time is harder than it looks. Richard Nixon once said, Lee Kuan Yew, he's a big man on a small stage, who in other times and places might have attained the world stature of a Churchill or a Gladstone. And that is probably right. Lee Kuan Yew had one tiny country, resources less, threatened, and he built it into something every other country in the world now studies and quietly envies. Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore is proof that a country's destiny is not fixed, that geography is not fair, that no resources does not mean no future. The same island that a man cried over in 1965, certain it would not survive, is today one of the most powerful and wealthy places on earth. And somewhere in the world right now, a leader of struggling country is reading about Singapore, wondering if they could do what Lee Kuan Yew did. And the honest answer is probably not, because what Lee Kuan Yew had above everything was not a plan. It was time, 30 uninterrupted years to see it through. One small island, no resources, no army, no water, surrounded by hostile neighbors, and one man who refused to accept that this meant failure. 60 years later, Singapore is one of the richest, safest, most efficient places on earth. You may disagree with how he did it, but you can't argue with what he built.